Sahanavavatu Sahano Punuktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astumavidvishavai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May our work be vigorous. May our study also be full of vigor, strength, and efficiency. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So, since it's a question and answer series, and since there are no answers without questions, if you have a question, unmute yourself and ask your question. There's no such thing as a foolish question. So we can do that starting now. Yes.
Swami, I have a question. Leading on from the dream interpretation course, which was amazing, and thank you so much for that, it was wonderful. But what I was wondering was, if in a dream, every person, number, color, thing, etc., is significant in dream state and can be interpreted, can the same be done for waking state?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I hope I have your question correct. The whole principle of Vedanta is only threefold. Firstly, there's only one existence. Secondly, your own inner existence and that one are one and the same. And thirdly, this whole existence that we call normal waking existence is mithya. That means it is only apparitional. So the cause of all this world that we take so seriously is a mistake. This mistake we call Maya. Now, long ago, these three principles were attempted to be conveyed by this body of work called Upanishads. Upanishad, sitting near a teacher, we can imagine maybe at the feet of a teacher. And these Upanishads would have come out at a time where there was some realization that ritualistic religion is not adequate. And the ritualistic religion is represented by that group in society which we know commonly as priests. A sector of society that was Brahmanas, who are supposed to be dedicated to the welfare of all being by doing some selfless activity that had no injury in mind to anybody and any creature, purely for the welfare of society. The logic goes like this, that if we want society to thrive, food is necessary. From food, well, we have to have sunshine and rain. A number of natural components have to cooperate together to produce what we want. And that all gets translated into a human body and all other bodies also. Not only a body, but it gets translated into a mind. And all our forms and images, actions and reactions come from what is called mind. So there has to be some dedicated section of society that is prepared to direct society's intentions. And they do it through a series of mantras. That is, a series of thought movements designed to mobilize, activate, and crystallize all the forces of nature that we classify in the waking state and what modern science investigates. This is our world that we call waking state. Now, at that time, of course, the ritualistic activities that accompany these mantras are designed to sustain society, not only here, but hereafter. So it's purely a linear world with no dream state acknowledged. But the nearest to it would be this. What happens when the waking state goes? Dream comes on and dreamless sleep also comes on. If the memory does not accompany sleep, that is just pure sleep. And we can measure this as brain waves in a waking state. because 5 varieties of brain waves are there, corresponding to what Patanjali in his Patanjali Yoga Sutras classifies as 5 different types of vrittis or waves in the mind. So that when all these activities go on with the sense of sustaining the waking state, how do we also sustain a world after it? And if we take the cosmos, is there not a comparative world or series of worlds that is exactly similar to this world of ours? That is, we are conscious of 3 areas of existence. We are conscious of a waking state. We know from the dream interpretation that we are conscious of a dream state. While in the dream state, we know nothing of the waking state. When in the waking state, we know nothing of the dream state except by memory. And neither of these know anything about a deep sleep, only after the fact, and as evaluated from a waking state. So our view of reality goes like this: the waking state of consciousness, wherein we find our own bodies, wherein we find our own minds, and we can observe all the actions and reactions that take place in response to an environment. This environment contains events. It contains objects. It also contains questions. And we try to answer it from our waking point of view, means I'm an individual. So an essential component of the waking state is our sense of I am this. And that invariably puts us in an individual mode that creates some selfishness. Ultimately, that selfishness creates wars. But it also creates mental difficulties, psychological aberrations, defense mechanisms, attack mechanisms, worries, difficulties, problems, wishes, unfulfilled desires. These are some of the ways in which this expression of dream comes out. So now all of the activities, all the drama that we have in the waking state gets transferred to the dream state, where the unconscious mind tries to sort out problems if they're there, tries to sort out wishes if they're there, enacts a drama in some cases where we are permitted to do something in a dream but not in a waking state. We may have a frustration with somebody in a waking state and wish to do them harm. Let's say poison their tea. Now, we can't legitimately do that unless we want a life sentence of jail. So in a dream, we can do it and get away with it. So the dream operates on a basis of an overflow of impressions and internal subtle psychological states. And there we find a different kind of reality. But is it less of a reality than the waking state? So that we know the dream state is caused by several things. What are these things? All the numbers, symbols, and all the dreamt items is the unconscious mind giving you messages in familiar ways and forms. But that's not the end of the story, because behind waking, dream, and dreamless sleep, some observing, knowing, witnessing entity stands there. Some knower, some witness, some thinker stands and is able to bring all the collection of the experiences together and manifest them in such a way that in a waking state, we can analyze them. This entity is not subject to anything. It is the subject. All the things in dream are objects. All the people are objects. And there are so many egos in it, because every sense of every figure, every event is simply a variation of the dreamer. The dreamer and the dream, there's no difference. So we know the causality in a dream. Now, coming around to your question, is there a similar causality in the waking state? But in the dream state, as I say, the cause is not just the conscious mind, the conscious waking mind that presents something to the unconscious. Lord of the universe is involved in it. That witnessing component is also the manifesting component. And we use the word component a little awkwardly, because component means a part. This has no parts. All the other things have a part. This is the eternal subject. This is the seer that can never be seen. A knower can never be known. A witness can never be witnessed. So this knower, this thinker, this seer, this witness will drive these manifestations of consciousness, will manifest through the media. And the media in the dreamless sleep state where there are no figures, that media we can call darkness or ignorance, a kind of blanket, a kind of area, as it were, that has no distinctions within it. No light, no shade, no contrasts, no plus, no minus, no joy, no sorrow. It's simply there, and we are able to witness it. We can describe it from a waking point of view as a state of peace. Why is it peaceful? Because there's no second to argue with you. There's no second to fear. But behind it all, a manifesting and witnessing entity. Its manifesting aspect we call thinker. It manifests in three different ways: waking, dream, and deep sleep. Now, this is the final argument. This is the final conclusion. This is the absolute trump card in the Vedanta's arsenal. And so for this reason, the Upanishads bring this out in many different Upanishads. More or less all Upanishads will make some reference of some kind to these three states of consciousness. And there's a reason for it, because unless we're able to distinguish between these three states, this discernment, unless this discernment is not there, how can we practice? If we, as devotees, for example, don't think that God is everything, then it means that the world is everything. And if we think partially that God is something, then it also means this world is something, and that this world proportionately is more than the God. And this is how we now perform and behave, and this is how we strategize our own pain. So, what is the causal relationship? Since the causal relationship in a dream are the components dragged across from the waking state, that is operating at the subtle underlayer of the unconscious, the input is the manifesting entity. In other words, to put it simply, God is giving you messages through the dream state. Now, in the waking state, we have to use the same principle. The manifesting entity comes out in the waking state. The only difference is that there's only one ego present. And the manifesting aspect of it is still thought. But it manifests in a different way. It manifests as the drama of all the ingredients that come together. And these are the subtle glories of God. If we want to put it in this way, we can put it like that. God's glories and grace flows everywhere, and we have the capacity to coordinate all of this. And in other words, all the events of the waking state are nothing more than condensed thoughts. But what about our situation when we are born, and in this case, philosophically, we'll add in the waking state? What happens when we are born? Well, it's not a starting point for us, nor is it a finishing point. It's a continuation. It's not a full stop or a capital letter. It's merely a comma. So whatever we thought in the past, going way, way back, maybe thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe billions of births, we accumulate all that learned experience, pack it up in our baggage container, called the unconscious mind, and bring it forward with a suitable set of instruments, commonly called body-mind. The body and mind is only existent to our awareness in a waking state. It all disappears. So that if I go and fall off a ladder and break my leg, and this body gets taken to hospital, and they say, "I'm sorry, Swami, but you have to lose your leg." So they cut it off, and then they put it in a bucket, and I wave goodbye to it. Off it goes. Intrinsically, I'm not affected. Because when I glide across the border into a dream state, I take my 2 legs with me. And any number of legs. They're all mine because they all come from the dreamer. So how was it that experience in a waking state transferred itself to a dream without applying for a visa or purchasing an airline ticket? All of a sudden it comes across and comes out in our dream. And then all of this decides to blank off and disappear and go into a black hole, something like a black hole that we call deep sleep, dreamless sleep. So it is this display of consciousness. So the cause of everything, whether it's a waking world or a dream world or a deep sleep, comes from one source. That is a causal source. Then the details of it come from other causes. A causal law has to operate, and it operates on the basis of what movement did I make? And you might say, well, let's say take one single cell bacteria. Since we have this correlation, since we have the root of the DNA in common with even a bacteria, it's our distant relative, still surviving today. So how is it that it moved forward, as it were, with all its experiences and arrived at a multiple cooperation of cells called man's body? How did that arrive? How did that take place? Still, there is a desire, not necessarily labeled like that on the part of the bacteria, but at least acknowledged in biology, is a desire to survive. That desire to survive not only makes it just sustain its status quo, but also over time makes it push forward, so that one cell can realize that a cooperative effort, a multicellular organism is necessary. It is much more efficient. In your own body, different cells are independently operating and cooperatively operating. They have their own life, but they all know how to adjust themselves in the whole environment called a body, stemming from one single zygote cell. This one cell, indistinguishable, becomes multiple cells with different functions. Same DNA present, but with multiple different functions. And now we know that from physiological studies that this DNA is not the ruler kingpin of the cell. It is not, we are not genetic objects subject to the whims of our inherited genetic biology. Not at all. It's much more complex than that. There's a whole intelligence behind there that sees how adjustments can be made. So that when we talk about random mutations, every random mutation, with very few exceptions, will be on a cooperative basis, on a positive basis, because we would have so many backup systems. And it's difficult to say which one rules which. It all seems to be a horizontal cooperative system instead of a linear, progressively linear upward causation. So the law of causation in the waking state is absolutely there, but there's also some other component in the waking state. So every aspect of the waking state is caused by something, and sometimes we're able to trace it back, but other times we are not. Most times we're not. Most times we're not because we came with this baggage, and how to look into your past lives and see what the baggage came. But generally we can say that this baggage arrived and that we alone are the cause of it. But the backdrop to it the ultimate manifestor of it is one entity. The Upanishads call this entity Brahman. So this Brahman, and here a question was asked maybe the other week. So what is God? Because that person is used to these terms, Brahman, or Ishvara, or Bhagavan, or any number of terms like this. Somehow people want to avoid the word God, because for many people it comes with baggage, which is not necessarily positive. But when we really understand what this God means, we have no problem with it. We only have problem with it if we have an awkward concept. The word God arriving to us means only that principle that is responsible for the rhythmic nature of waking, dream, and dreamless sleep. It's cyclical operation, like standing behind or in front of a wall with an invisible entity behind, and there you see all of a sudden a red ball thrown up, and then a blue one, and then a green one. Red, blue, green, red, blue, green. The inference to us is some entity is standing there behind, unseen, and putting one up, and it comes down. Another one up, it comes down. And then the first one comes up and down. Some independent entity is there that can observe it. And that same independent entity is the one that's manifesting it. And since it's only one without second, then it cannot be different from that origin. The origin, the cause, is also the effect. What in philosophy language is called the material and efficient causes are one and the same. So this solves the difficulty of, if you have some original being, how does it arrive at becoming? How does this transition take place? Vedanta answer, there is no transition. One is just an expression of the other. And when it all goes away, just as it all goes away in a deep sleep, nothing gets affected. So in a deep sleep, you're withdrawing your consciousness, manifesting it in a drama called waking. That is then withdrawn, manifesting again in a series of events called dream. That is withdrawn. So first cause will be you. Second cause in every aspect of it is not necessarily a symbol. We can't use that language for a waking state. It's a manifestation. In a dream state, we can also use the term manifestation. All the events and people and places are manifestations of your waking conscious experience. And all of it is a supreme manifestation from that one supreme dreamer. That is the cosmic dreamer. That is the Lord of the universe. That is this one witness, knower, thinker. The thinker can never be thought of, but the thinker manifests the thought. And this thought comes to us in these three varieties, these different states of consciousness. In this sense, we live in an idealistic world. That means, using the philosophy of idealism, that everything is mind. Everything is a manifestation of mind. Where does matter come into this? See, there's an old saying, I don't mind and you don't matter. So mind over matter, you see. There's no mind. What we call mind is matter, and what we call matter is mind. You may say that matter is energy. Well, from a physics point of view, that's also true. But that energy is nothing more than mind. It is only mind. This whole world is nothing more than mind. And it expresses itself in three varieties of consciousness. Another cause is there in a waking state. Because a waking state, and when we say waking state, is our familiar universe, not only has this systematic causal relationship that operates in a framework of time, but it also has unpredictable elements. There is chaos in it. There is randomness in it. Because at the most fundamental level, for no reason whatsoever that we can think of, something pops up and goes away as quicker than it came. At this quantum level, where there are quantum fields, things come randomly, seemingly randomly into existence. and get annihilated. Electron comes, a positron comes, they smash, they explode, they disappear. And one of the great mysteries, of course, of modern science is, how does this universe come into being? It was never annihilated. It consists of matter. What happened to the antimatter is still an outstanding question. If all this came into existence and gets annihilated, Vedanta has the answer. We know about matter, antimatter, and so on and so forth. All this world is manifested as an apparitional effect of a divine, supreme, material and efficient cause, and that's it. So all of this is explained, but we have to bring in these metaphysical components to understand it. So apart from a causal law, there is also a randomness we call lila, a play. So this is the play that arises. These old philosophers knew this understanding. They knew that there had to be an explanation. Why is the world like this? And they came up with this beautiful concept. It is Lila Maya, not just Maya. It is Lila Maya. It is a sport where things arrive and things disappear. Things change. We can compare it to a poem. We can compare it to a drama. And that gives us a way of contacting the origin. If you think this world is a poem, then we make a God who's a poet. If you think this world is a creation, then God is a creator. If you think this world is a dance, then God is a cosmic dancer, a player. If you think that this world is something that is preserved, then God becomes a preserver. So God can be a creator, God can be a preserver, and God can be a player. God can be a Brahma, God can be a Vishnu, and God can be a Shiva. So these are two of the causal elements in the waking state, but the third one, of course, is what we call, from the waking point of view and from devotional language, what we call God. That is cosmic mind. There is a will that is directing these things. These three causes are there when we consider the waking state and the dream and dreamless sleep. But since the question is orientated around the waking life, every detail, every jot, every tittle is because of these three causes. The divine cause directing things in a sense of rhythm, this we call God or cosmic mind. The events that we ourselves cause, because cosmic mind is behind everything. And every place, every event, every person, every being, every object is simply a manifestation of this use of cosmic mind that we call thought. Thought is a stimulating entity that has the capacity to transform itself into at least 24 cosmic principles that ultimately arrive to us as you and me and job and finances and bank account and relational difficulties and joys and loves and sorrows and hates and pettiness and pleasure and pain, etc. Now that is why, and I mentioned before, when we say this prayer, we finish off with chanting and wishing peace in three ways. One is that we may have peace that is an antidote to all disturbances we ourselves have caused. The other is to see that we are protected against all the disturbances that others may cause. And finally, all these random things that are contained within our play, what insurance people call act of God. So that is why we chant Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. We do it 3 times so that we have overall protection from our childish ways on the one hand, and secondly, from other people's childish ways, and thirdly, just because God has a play. So I hope I answered your question, and I hope there's another question coming up.
Thank you very much, Swami. Thank you.
Swamiji, just it is a question, all right, but kind of tying in with the section of what you mentioned earlier on in your talk, where you're saying that where somebody is born or is passing away, it is just a point of journey and you're kind of moving on. What is it that kind of brings on, I know I'm bringing it back to the Chandogya Upanishad where we were talking and the thought that you had referred to. And from what I did read up, I don't know whether I've got that right, but I was reading up about the Vaishvanara Vidya and the Panchagni Vidya, where the question arises as to how do you know which soul is coming back to be born, or, I mean, they don't decide. So what prompts that? What brings that on? And whether that was how your thought for the day was related, because I still didn't get the full gist of that day's thought that you had put forth. Neither did I understand much from what I read here.
Okay, good. There's a reason why I do things like that. One is because we should know our own scriptures. And since we're a Vedanta society, we should know Vedanta. And to know Vedanta, we have to know the Upanishads. Now, the Upanishads are beautifully put into a lovely bouquet, a lovely garland of flowers. In the Gita Dhyana, we are told how the cow represents, and its milk represents the Upanishads, how Arjun is the calf that induces the milk, and how we are the drinkers of these Upanishads. So every chapter in the Bhagavad Gita is termed Upanishad. It's assembled like this for ease of our understanding. And yet when you ask people who have a cultural background, who have a cultural inheritance of this wonderful celestial song, very few people you find have even read it, let alone studied it. Now, of course, these are verses. Bhagavad Gita is a philosophical poem. And in poems, just as my poems, you can't say everything. So you have to leave a lot to inference. People have to think about it a little bit and see what they'll get from it. So by introducing something that is from the Upanishads, I'm asking you to make friends with the Upanishads and do some little homework. And it's good that you did it. Chandogya Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad are the two longest Upanishads of all the Upanishads which are there. Well, of all the Upanishads that we take. When I say we take, that is that those heads or founders of schools of thought within the Vedanta movement have made profound commentaries on these. So we take these Upanishads and we study them, being the oldest Upanishad. Subsequently, many Upanishads came, of course. 108, supposed to be 108 Upanishads. But we're not familiar with many of them. We're only familiar with perhaps 13 of them. So we have 8 shorter ones, and then we have the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and we have the Chandogya Upanishad. This is 10 Upanishads. But other Upanishads are also there. Maitri Upanishad is there. The Shvetashvatara Upanishad. These are all, and there has been references to these from these giants such as Shankaracharya. So Chandogya Upanishad is a tough one because you have to wade through a lot of material that is puzzling, because all of these Upanishads are there in stanzas. And these stanzas are short, one line or several lines of statements, not as brief as aphorisms, and yet assuming a few things, assuming that the listener knows some of what is being spoken of and ready for a commentary. That is why commentaries are necessary. It is also why a teacher is necessary. A teacher is there because doubts have to be removed, clarity has to be sought, and interpretations have to be made. And the safest way of doing it is not to make one of your own. So this is a very clever device that Swami Vivekananda used when he says, according to the yogis. See, so according to the Upanishads, according to, then if you disagree with me, I just put my hands up and say, don't blame me. And this great Rishi said it, this Patanjali said it, and so and so said it. The yogi said it, etc. We blame somebody else very nicely. So Chandogya and Chandi, the things that are chanted in all of the Havans, various Brahmins are there, having different responsibilities. And so Chandogya Upanishad is part of the Sama Veda. That is to do with chanting and singing. Now, today is Yoga Day, International Yoga Day. And Chandogya has a kind of speciality in it, and that is to do with breath and breathing. And there's a wonderful story. I'll just tell it in summary. So, all the sense organs, that is all the internal devas or gods, wanted to know what was that entity that was the supreme entity. In other words, judged on this fact, and the creator puts this as a criteria, if one of them leaves, what will happen? So the eyes were the first to leave. And the eyes left and they came back after some 2 years or so, and to assess, okay, how did you manage? We managed everything well. We managed to hear, we managed to think, we managed to do all the functions, only we couldn't see. Now that you're back, we can see. So nothing devastating happened. Then like that, the ears went, and like that, the mind went. When the mind went, then the rest became like small children, a little mindless, see, not thinking very clearly. Mind came back, all was restored. Then the breath started to leave, described like a horse leaving and taking with such energy that it takes all its tethers with it. Supposing you have a horse and it's tied to 3 posts. As the horse is leaving, the rope and all the posts to which it's tied start uprooting and leaving with it. Until, of course, all the other devas or senses beg, please, 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 don't go. As when you leave, we all have to leave. And therefore, breath became supreme. So there's a question. All these Upanishads therefore have fundamental questions. One fundamental question then that the Chandogya Upanishad postulates is, what is life? What is life? There's still a question that people are debating today. There's a great, one of the great pioneers of quantum mechanics, what is known then as quantum physics, along with Niels Bohr and so on, was Schrödinger. You must have heard of Schrödinger's cat. And Schrödinger gave a series of lectures, I think it was 1938. The person who would be able to tell you accurately would be Professor Sen. Anyhow, he has a compiled series of lectures called, under the title, What is Life? In that book, he actually predicts the DNA in his own way. But that famous series of lectures is there, but the point is it poses this one question, what is life? And in that he comes to a conclusion, there's only necessarily one consciousness. We were talking earlier about waking, dream, and dreamless sleep. He comes to a conclusion there can only be one consciousness. Now the passage I took, having given you a background to all of that, was one of the students came and asked to a royal court. I mentioned earlier that Brahmanas were to do with rituals. And I started to say that the Upanishads are often developed not in caves, not in ashrams, some of them are, not amongst the Brahmins, the priests, the ritualists, but actually amongst the royal courts, where the Kshatriya, the royal sages are there, practical people who want practical answers. And they feel that this monopoly that the Brahmanas have is not justified because all they know is ritual. And so this comes out in this passage in the Chandogya Upanishad. And it begins with Shvetaketu Aruneya. He attends one of these royal assemblies, the Panchalas. And he comes across a royal king, a princely person, Pravana Jayavali, and he asks the first question, young man, your father taught you everything that's to know, because a Brahmin's job is to teach the young boy. So let me see, did he teach you certain things? Yes, he taught me everything. Okay, so here's some questions to you. And I'm going to paraphrase in something like a fun way. Where do folks go on death? When this body goes, another way of phrasing it, when this waking state goes, where do we go to? What is the world that we go to? The second question, how do we return? If we have a return policy, then how do we get here back? What do we call reincarnation? 2 questions, 5 questions in all are asked. Next question, do you know the path and where these paths diverge of the devas and the mains? Humans ultimately who come back in this way, ancestors and so on, do you know these 2 divergent paths? And why does heaven, or the version of that, not get full? How many parking spaces are in heaven? And if everybody goes to these worlds, how is it that nothing gets filled up? And then another curious question to do with ritual. Why is the 5th libation of whatever is offered into the fire, why is this 5th libation of water called man? So these 5 questions are asked, and Shvetaketu shakes his head and says, I have no idea. My father never told me this. Now there's a reason why his father never told him this. His father didn't know. His father was a Brahmin called Gautama. So Gautama was asked by his son, hey, I went to this royal court. These are the questions I asked. I couldn't answer. You never told me these things. And his father has to frankly say, the reason why I never told you these things, I don't know. But let's go back to this king and ask. So he goes to the royal court, and from there on, we find the passage that I quoted. And the answers to these questions now come out in this passage. But it's a very involved passage that requires a great deal of imagination, because it's put in a poetic way, a symbolic way, a way that we can easily understand. So if we pick up that passage, which we can do, the name of the king is Panchalas. Panchalas. Actually, sorry, the name of the assembly is Panchalas now. The name of the king is Pravahana Jayavali. Pravahana Jayavali. Now, is that significant? Not at all. The beauty about the Upanishads is that we have no personalities involved. We have general figures presented. We have no description of what this man looked like, how old he was, how rich he was. We have no idea of this. Nor does the Upanishads have any interest in it. They're simply giving you this, whether it's factual or fictional, probably factual, to illustrate the fact that 5 questions are there, common to us all. We have to ask these questions, and we won't get any answers unless we investigate properly. Now, we're going to advance then. And so we come to a section, and we come to section 4. So the reference is 541. That's the reference. That's where we start. So the passage begins, Aso Vava Lokaha Gautama Agnihi. That world truly, O Gautama, is a sacrificial fire. It's not literally a sacrificial fire, but that's how it's been described. Why should any world be a sacrificial fire? Because this world is a world of change. And for change to happen, something has to leave and something new has to be taken on. So it says, as a sacrificial fire, the sun itself is the fuel. So now it requires our imagination. Imagine a great cosmic universe. And we say that the sun, our own universe, the solar universe, that the sun is its fuel. Because every sacrifice requires a fire that needs fuel. Its rays are the smoke that comes from it. The day is the flame, and the moon are the coals, and the stars the sparks. Now you see it coming out in my poem, isn't it? All right, like this. So it's an analogy of the heavenly region to the sacrificial fire. This is all worked out. And the sun is the fuel, because the world shines. And it shines only when it's lit by the sun. You take the sun away, it's not lit up. And the rays are the smoke because they rise from the sun. And then the day, of course, is the flame, is the external effect that we see from it. And then the moon is brought in and it becomes our visible, it becomes the embers, because what is left over from the sun, as it were, is the moon. It's a kind of residual thing. When everything is night, when the fire is gone, then the embers come out and there we find the moon. Let's be careful not to take this literally. Let us view it with the poet's eye. Now, in this teaching and in every teaching throughout the Upanishads, and any worthwhile teacher, we take Sri Ramakrishna as an example, he won't or she won't tell you the end position. They have to lead you there step by step, taking things for granted. And one way of doing it is repeating the formula in different contexts. So then, having said this world is like that, it's a wonderful sacrifice, and these are the various components to it. The next is, in this fire, the deities, that is, all these manifested glories of the One Supreme, they offer the oblation of faith. Faith is necessary. And from this offering arises Soma. Soma is a traditional offering associated with the moon, associated with the mind. So one component is the universe, another component is mind. And if mind also is something like a sacrifice, then how does it work? All the deities, that is all the senses, they offer their oblation of what? They have to have faith. Faith is the very, very key component. If you don't have faith, you don't have anything. Faith in what? Faith in yourself, faith in the scriptures, and faith in the causal entity which is there, that religion calls God. If you don't have faith in these three things, another is added, of course, faith in Guru, but faith in God, faith in Guru is actually the same thing, and faith in scripture and faith in Guru is the same thing. So water is offered as the offering of faith. And so the king also answers the last question, which is this last oblation. Why is it called man? Anyway, it goes on like this. Now, this is all to do with the course of the soul. What is the soul? The soul is that entity that has this accumulative experience that is driven forward because it has an inherent urge for its own freedom. And so we might say that the deity of rain, O Gautama, is the sacrificial fire. The air itself is its fuel, the cloud is the smoke, the lightning is the flame, and the thunder the coals, and the thunderings are the sparks. This also came out in the poem. Of course, the term Radhani is also used, and generally it actually means hail or rumblings, in a thunderstorm. In Ireland, you don't get these thunderstorms, but in Africa, India, and so on, you get these very dramatic thunderstorms. Then the earth truly is, O Gautama, he says, is the sacrificial fire of the year is the fuel, space is the smoke, night is the flame, and the quarters the coals. Intermediate quarters are the sparks. And having said all this, you can reread that poem and pick up the details like that. Now, all this is leading to this one question: where does this cumulative individual go after the physical death? And it's in answer to these 5 questions that were asked. Now it goes on like that, and then it goes on to, and I'm moving it on because it's 7 minutes to 12. We can pick this up more next week, same theme, with subsequent questions that you may have. Now, one who knows all of these things, that is, in summary, that everything that is observed in different regions and different spheres of your experience are compared to sacrifices, using all the different components as offerings, as fire, as smoke, as embers. So those who know this and those who in the forest meditate on faith as austerity, or with faith and austerity. That is, just to do austerity has no meaning unless you accompany it with faith, trust. They go to the light, and from that light to day, and from day to the bright half of the month of the waxing moon, and from the bright half of the month to those 6 months during which the sun moves northwards. All this you take symbolically. In other words, it goes to a direction of light, light representing knowledge. Those who know this, that is the doctrine of the 5 fires, says Adi Shankaracharya, he makes out, of course, that this refers to the activities of householders. But then it says, from these months to the year, that is from time, from the year to the sun, from the sun to the moon, from the moon to the lightning, there is a person who is non-human. He leads them on to the cosmic mind, what we call Brahma. This is the path leading to the gods. The one question, what is the distinction? And what is the demarcation of the world of the devas and the world of the mains? All right, let me stop to summarize. So when this body goes, what happens? 2 paths are open. One path goes toward the light, that is toward the world of Brahma. Some, of course, may come back from there, but others will progressively go on to freedom, because the next step from cosmic mind is the ultimate. But the other people will go to the path of the moon. And this is symbolized in this way. Now, in the Mahabharata, we find Bhishma has to wait for the sun to take its northern course. And we have just entered from yesterday the southern course in the northern hemisphere. The southern course means that the earth is tilted in such a way, 23.44 degrees, that the sun looks as if it's moving toward the south as it approaches autumn and winter, and then looks as if it's moving toward the north as it approaches spring and summer. So we had the longest day, we had the summer. So we have clearly the path of the light and the path of darkness, and Bhishma hangs around because he wants to go to the northern path. Of course, it's not literal. Why is it not literal? Because what happens if you're in the southern hemisphere? It's all reversed. So I have it in my diary, I won't tell you what year, that this body here will find its demise 11th June. Then I've hit the northern path. But who knows, maybe I'll be in the southern hemisphere and start backpedaling on this. Now, See, the earliest conception of the path of the deities, that is the path of light, is found in the Rig Veda itself. And where Agni, the entity that leads us forward, that leads all our intentions forward, who serves as the intermediary between gods and men, as bearing the offerings to the gods, is addressed thus. So, knowing the ways by which the deities go, thou, Agni, O fire, has become the unwearied messenger, the bearer of oblations. The path on which the sacrifices were taken to the heavenly world becomes the path by which the sacrifice himself ascended to the world of the deities. Now, but those who in the village practice a life of sacrifices and perform works of public, as opposed to the forest, yeah, those urban dwellers, that's those people who are not meditating necessarily. They're just living a normal, so-called normal life. Practice a life of sacrifices and perform works of public utility and almsgiving. That is good people, but not those who have meditated deeply. Good people, good solid citizens. They pass into the smoke, from smoke to night, from night to the latter, that is the dark half of the month, and from the latter dark half of the month to the 6 months in which the sun moves southward, but they do not reach the year. So now we see two paths are there, and it's all also related what happens to the soul after death. And we have to understand, generally speaking, that those who have led a life of meditation and have acquired this deep spiritual knowledge will go one way. And those who are good people, who have done all the ritualistic sacrifices, given to the poor, been upstanding social supporters, they go to a different way. And all of this in the background to a concept. This whole life is like a giant fire ceremony, is like a giant sacrifice. And in order to get somewhere, we have to make a sacrifice. The original sacrifice of those forest dwellers was faith. Faith was the sacrifice. The sacrifice from others will be other things. So they're going to the worlds of the ancestors, the fathers. And this is symbolized, so I'll continue, from that world of the fathers to space, from space to the moon. That is the king Soma, representing the mind. That is the food of the gods that the gods eat. Let me try and explain some of the symbolism of it. You see, the sun is associated with the mind and is associated also with matter, is associated with growth of herbs, associated with the seasons. The sun, on the other hand, is associated with life. And this contrast of life and darkness is there. So the sun is only a reflection of life, of the life giver called the sun. If you invest all your energy in the reflected version, what we described previously as this waking state, if that's where your investment is, then you'll go to the corresponding world like that, which is described here as the world of the moon, going through a dark course, going through smoke and so on, because the moon will represent the embers of the original solar sacrifice. And so, from these, that is the months of the world of the fathers, from the world of the fathers to space, from space to the moon, and so on. But I'm going to give you the punchline on this. Having dwelt there, as long as there is residue of good works, as long as your karma and the effects of your karma is now about to be expended or will be expended, after that, after your expenditure of your holiday money, you come back and return again by that course by which you came from space to air, and after having become the air, become the smoke, and after becoming the smoke, become the mist. Now, can you imagine now looking out at mist that is very, very fine particles of water. After having become mist, they become cloud. After having become cloud, rain, and they are born here as, and the example is given, rice, barley, etc. In other words, food. It comes out as food. We don't get food unless we have water. So it comes out as, in this case, literally rice, barley, herbs, trees, and ultimately the sesamum plants and beans and so on and so forth. And from there, the release becomes extremely difficult. For whoever eats the food and sows the seed, he becomes like unto that. From there, you get into the seed, and from the seed, again, a human body. It is wonderfully worked out how that happens. Those whose conduct here, that means in this waking world, has been good, will quickly attain a good birth. That's literally, they'll go to a womb. The birth of a Brahmin, somebody who is dedicated to society, or Kshatriya, somebody who is dedicated to protecting society, or in the birth of some family, in this case classified as Vaishya, that is somebody earning a living from industry or commerce or agriculture. The vast majority of people like that. But those whose conduct here has been a little reprehensible, has been evil, not evil by definition means full of selfishness. They will quickly attain the same birth, an evil birth. Maybe they'll be born as an animal, maybe as a dog, or a hog, because it rhymes, or the birth of somebody who is the lowest in society, what is often called a Chandala. But on neither of these ways are those small creatures which are continually revolving, those of whom it is said is be born and die. There is a third state. And this is where Vedanta now comes out properly. By this, it comes about that that world becomes full. Therefore, let one seek to guard himself. And so, you see, if we pursue wisdom, we travel by the path of the deities. Because Deva means actually an illuminating factor. You can say it means light. And if we perform good works, we travel by the path of the ancestors, those people who are good people. And if we do neither, if we don't do either of those two, we will continue to just revolve as creatures. How is it in evolution that we still have the residue of the bacteria that we mentioned previously? Why didn't they advance? Some advanced and some didn't. So if we do neither good nor bad, mediocre, retaining our status quo gets retained. We don't go anywhere. It's all very fair. So he who steals gold, he who drinks wine, he who dishonors the teacher's bed, he who kills a brahmana, these are examples given in this Upanishad. These four do fall, as also the fifth who consorts with them, supports them in this activity. But he who knows these 5 fires that we mentioned previously, thus is not stained by evil. Even though he consorts with these people, he becomes pure, he becomes clean, obtains a virtuous world. And he who knows this, yea, he who knows this, it comes to him or her. So now the 5 questions are answered. But with this in mind, choose your own destiny in the waking world. Now we'll tie the 2 subjects in, earlier one and the latter one. So the one who takes the waking world and makes their own positive destiny. Not positive in a selfish sense, but positive in terms of selflessness, welfare of all beings, a pure life, a meditative life, a thorough search for the truth of what exists. With that pure mind, they now advance, as it were, with the ultimate goal of taking away both waking dream and dreamless sleeps. Now let's examine. You see, he who steals gold and drinks wine, we just have to take the purport of this. Because otherwise somebody said, I took a glass of wine last night. Am I destined for the pits of hell? No, not like that. But what it means is, he who values material objects and who values satisfying the senses, what Sri Ramakrishna calls greed and lust, in that order taken here. And then he who has led a bad life, who has murdered somebody or murdered thousands, because often the question comes, what about the Hitler? Where did the Hitler go? But if you know the purport of the whole of these life represented in these 5 fires as these 5 sacrificial performances, then you have satisfied your destiny, your particular destiny. Now the Upanishad, of course, deals with that section. Where does the soul go afterwards? But you can't leave it there, and we won't have time to deal with the next section. But we have to go on to understand, that being said, what is this universal self? And so when we take that context and bring that together, we have a complete picture, not only of a destiny according to our activities, but also the possibility of freedom here and now. And this is really the ultimate goal of the Vedanta and the ultimate goal of the Upanishads. So that's an elucidation on that particular verse from the Chandogya Upanishad. A beautiful, beautiful passage, giving us the experience of imagery and poetry to teach us some fundamental lessons, to urge us into a pure and selfless life on the one hand, to understand that sacrifice, self-sacrifice is necessary as a method regarding anything and everything that you do, and the consequences of every thought and every action. And the responsibility is your own. Your responsibility is your own. And therefore, whatever movement you make in the waking state is entirely up to you, even when beset with these 2 other factors, causal factors in the waking state, namely things caused by others and things which are randomly arriving. Because thought that is taken with great faith and strength and steered in a consciously directed way overcomes all of these things, because you now have the ability to manipulate and fit in, as it were, all the effects of your thought that we see as a condensed world in front of us. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.